guy didn't just show up to be a laborer or a rock truck driver or whatever. I mean, there's no use staying our way, and you got to get out on top.
Finding gold in the soil of Oak Island in the Yukon is no joke, but what happened this time has shaken the entire gold rush community. Tony Beets finally confirmed the tragic news that fans had been thinking was just a rumor for weeks. There had been a strange silence at the dig site for the past few days. The machines were running, but the crew's faces clearly indicated something serious was going on inside. And today, Tony himself went on camera and spoke, something that stopped everyone's heart. The Beets crew in the Yukon performs heavy digging for 8 to 10 hours every day, and you'll be shocked to know that a single cut can yield 2,000 cubic yards of material. But this time, an unusual void zone discovered beneath the material halted the entire operation. The GPR scan revealed a collapsed chamber-like pattern at a depth of 14 or 16 feet, considered the most dangerous signal in mining. Tony called an emergency halt because of this reading, and this is where the entire tragic story begins. Fans are still speculating about the real damage, millions in gear damage, a permit issue, or a major threat to crew safety. But brother, what we're about to show you today isn't just a small thing. It's a twist that has changed the entire season. And if you haven't subscribed yet, honestly, you'll miss the next big twist, because what's about to be revealed has never happened before in Gold Rush history. Now sit down, watch the video until the very last second, because Tony's revelation is as shocking as it is dangerous. Everyone on Gold Rush knows Tony Beets as a tough, loud, and confident person. His voice, his attitude, and his fearless decision-making are his hallmarks. But this time, as the cameras rolled on the dig site, Tony's entire vibe seemed to change. He wasn't speaking much, his eyes fixed on the ground, as if in deep worry. Crew members were whispering among themselves, because Tony's silence itself was a scary signal. Tony usually pushes ahead with full force no matter what. Whether the weather is bad, machines are breaking down, or ground readings are bad, Tony always has a sharp plan in place. But that morning, when the production team asked him for a regular update, he simply said, "No comments right now." Fans who have observed Tony for years immediately understood that something unusual had happened. Tony's body language conveyed the seriousness of the entire scenario. The most talked about topic among fans was why Tony was so quiet. People on social media were commenting that Tony's face looked so stressed for the first time. One user on Reddit wrote, "Tony, shut up. This means the situation is out of control." This seemed true as the camera crew reported that Tony watched the scans for 30 minutes without saying a word. Such behavior was almost never seen in Gold Rush history, but the real tension grew when the entire crew was suddenly called into line. Tony didn't make eye contact with anyone, simply pointing to red markings on the ground. The crew instantly understood that the situation wasn't simple. Rarely does Tony stop the crew without explanation. For most viewers, this was the first sign that something had been found at the dig site that they didn't want to reveal yet. Now comes the strange 48-hour shutdown that rocked the entire Yukon community. For the past 2 days, the machines had been completely shut down. No excavator sound, no wash plant running, no truck movement. But the strangest thing was that production didn't tell anyone the reason for the shutdown. Even fans of the show were shocked, because downtime in Gold Rush means a loss of money. Every day's digging stoppage results in an operational loss of approximately $15,000, $20,000. And for a major miner like Tony, this is no small loss at all. Crew members were also asking each other why the machines were shut down. The excavator operator once said into the camera, "I feel like we haven't been told anything." This line in itself creates suspense. Production normally records even the smallest of issues, but this time the cameras were intentionally turned off. Fans thought that perhaps ground instability had occurred or a major legal issue had arisen. An unusual thing was also noted at the dig site during the shutdown. A small team of engineers quietly entered the inside area. They neither spoke to the crew nor allowed any footage. Some readings were taken on the ground, then they silently left. This behavior raised even more suspicion. Fans believed it was a sign that the situation wasn't just a normal breakdown or weather delay. Many viewers also noticed that some crew members were visibly stressed. Monica's eyes were red, Kevin was repeatedly looking at the ground, and Mike avoided the camera. All these signals indicated that something serious was going on inside, but production wasn't revealing it yet. Theories began to pour in on social media. Some said it was a financial issue, some said an accident had occurred, and some suggested that the immediate halt was perhaps due to ground collapse. In those 48 hours, the mood of the entire site had completely changed. The only sound heard in the dust-covered mining site was the sound of wind. No machinery was moving, and a strange sense of fear and uncertainty pervaded the entire site. Fans were saying, "So much silence means something big has happened." And frankly, when a fearless man like Tony goes silent, it means the issue isn't simple. The biggest suspense surrounding this question is this: what was Tony hiding? Why did the machine stop? What readings did the engineers see? Was this shutdown just a precaution or part of a tragic event? And this is the truth that emerges in the following video, one that shook the entire gold rush world. Ground scans are normally routine. Before every major dig, the condition of the ground beneath the surface is checked with a GPR machine. But this time, as soon as Tony called the GPR team, the crew instantly realized the situation was serious. The scanner was slowly moving across the ground, and the lines on the monitor appeared normal at first glance. But suddenly, a sharp red spike appeared in one spot, catching everyone's attention. Red zone simply means something's wrong here, and it's not safe. The GPR operator's eyes were fixed on the screen, and he softly said, "This doesn't look normal." Fans might find this detail minor, but in mining, a red anomaly means there's a hollow area beneath the surface, meaning the ground is empty. If a machine or worker accidentally steps into such a zone, the entire area could collapse within seconds. This is why Tony immediately marked the area with red paint. Tony's concern was clearly visible on camera. The scan's depth readings showed that this hollow pocket was approximately 14 to 16 feet deep. This is the depth where both heavy and medium-duty machines operate. If an excavator reached this zone, its 40,000-pound weight could instantly shatter the ground. Many veteran miners say that void pockets are mining's most silent killers, because the ground looks perfectly normal from the outside, but inside it's completely empty, like a trap. And that's exactly what was happening here. The GPR tech repeated the scan twice to leave no doubt, but each time the same red blotch appeared on the screen. Tony's face lacked that familiar confidence this time. He kept glancing between the screen and the ground. He quietly signaled the crew to retreat. Production immediately cordoned off the area, but they too realized the situation was more dangerous than a routine warning. This was the moment when the real suspense began at the dig site. Now let's come to the incident that literally stopped the entire crew's heartbeat. The next morning, when excavator operator Mike was doing his routine digging, he had no idea that his machine had reached the edge of the red zone. As the bucket went a little deeper, the entire arm suddenly jerked downward. The front of the machine sank about 2 feet into the ground. It was so sudden that the operator lost his balance for a second. Mike immediately put the machine into neutral mode, but his hands were visibly shaking. Crew members and the camera team rushed to his side. This was literally the moment when a complete disaster was just inches away. If the excavator had moved a few more inches, the entire 40,000-pound machine could have fallen straight into the void. Tony later said, "A few more seconds, and this could have been a disaster." Such an incident is the most terrifying for an operator in mining, because the machine's sudden dip means the ground beneath is completely hollow. The shocking thing was that this sinking occurred right on the edge of the red anomaly. This meant the readings were absolutely accurate, and the danger was extremely real. The crew's voices suddenly quieted. Everyone understood this wasn't a small problem. There was something underground that could collapse the entire cut. If the machine had tilted, the operator could have been seriously injured, and the camera crew was also very close. Production immediately halted work in the area and urgently called in the engineering team. Tony himself quietly went to the excavator and checked the ground by hand. The soil was soft, and a hollow sound was coming from below. In mining, this is called dead soil. This was the moment that forced Tony to believe that a grave risk existed at the dig site. He immediately ordered the crew to retreat, saying, "Nobody goes near this spot now." Work on the site officially ceased that day, and the crew, just by looking at each other's faces, knew a major disaster had been averted. Fans' fears were now becoming reality. Tony had never been so tense before. That sudden sinking of the excavator was the beginning of this entire tragic news, due to which the direction of the entire season changed. After the excavator sinking incident, Tony Beets understood that the real danger now loomed not just over the ground, but over every machine. 3 large machines were parked right next to that zone: a $300,000 excavator, a $150,000 heavy dozer, and a wash plant system worth approximately $750,000. In the mining world, these machines aren't just tools, but the backbone of the entire operation. If the ground were to collapse below the red zone, all these expensive machines could sink in one fell swoop. The excavator weighs approximately 40,000 libs. If that weight were to fall on hollow ground, the ground would burst like a balloon and collapse into the empty space below. The dozer is also almost as heavy. In the wash plant, due to its constant vibration and water pressure, becomes even more dangerous. Tony clearly saw that if the machines weren't moved immediately, millions of dollars in damage awaited. That's why, without wasting a second, he signaled to the crew, "Move everything, now!" Crew members suddenly went into panic mode because even moving the machines was risky. Heavy equipment, when moving on unstable ground, can cause its entire load to collapse on a small, weak spot. If even one machine went down, it would take hours for the recovery crew to arrive, halting the entire season. Fans should understand that machine damage in Gold Rush isn't just a mechanical loss, it directly impacts the entire season's earnings. A single machine breakdown often disrupts the entire production timeline. Tony's mind was on one level. If the wash plant went down, it wouldn't just result in a loss of $750,000, but the entire cut's processing would be halted. Gold recovery is simply not possible without the wash plant. Relocating it takes at least half a day, and suddenly shifting such heavy units is extremely dangerous. That's why, when the crew removed the wash plant from the ground, the air at the dig site seemed to stop. As the machinery was slowly moved into the safe zone, the crew was almost breathless. Excavator operator Mike calmly reversed the machine, but the tension on his face was evident, since the same machine had suddenly sunk just moments earlier. Kevin and Monica were both checking markings on the ground to ensure the machines were moving in the correct line. The entire process was so quiet that production didn't even add background music. The real-time tension was creating the atmosphere on its own. Now let's come to the point that sent shockwaves through fans and the online community: the sudden entry of environmental and safety inspectors. Suddenly, 2 trucks arrived at the dig site gate, and officials arrived directly to meet Tony without prior notice. Normally, inspectors make scheduled visits, but such a surprise. Arrival is very rare. The crew immediately realized that the matter wasn't just a machinery risk, but also a legal and environmental danger. The inspectors were carrying ground stability report forms and, without any delay, began walking towards the red zone. The camera crew was instructed to maintain distance, further fueling speculation. Fans later remarked after watching the episode, "Inspectors entering like this is a very serious issue." And indeed, mining law makes inspection mandatory if there's even a suspicion of a land collapse, sinkhole, or groundwater hazard at a site. One inspector placed some probe tools on the ground and checked the soil consistency. Seeing his facial expression, many on the crew became more tense. The soil showed unusual softness and hollow echoes, signs of dangerous underground voids. The inspector spoke quietly to Tony, and the cameras were turned away. Suspense was so high that even production couldn't understand what findings the inspectors were looking for. The most worrying part for fans was that inspectors normally only come when there's an immediate safety threat. Viewers online began theorizing. Some said the permit might be revoked, some suggested dangerous gas pockets had been found, and some suggested the entire zone would be moved to a restricted category. The inspector's arrival only made Tony more tense, as he kept looking at the ground and didn't speak much to anyone. After the excavator sinking and the inspector's arrival, the atmosphere at the dig site had completely changed. Where the previous day had been filled with laughter and fun, there was now a deep silence. The crew's faces clearly indicated that they were not just confused, but terrified. No one was cracking their usual jokes, no loud banter. Everyone's body language indicated that the situation was far more dangerous than they had expected. In the mining world, when a crew becomes silent like this, you can understand that a major problem is simmering underground. Kevin Beets is always calm and technically minded, but that day a constant tension was visible on his forehead. He repeatedly glanced at the red-marked zone, then glanced at the GPR data and took a deep breath. There was no intense look in his eyes that normally exists. Instead, there was a fear that if the site wasn't inspected properly, instead of praise, the entire season might be questioned. Her internal pressure was palpable, as the Beets family represents every technical part of the entire operation. Monica Beets was also unusually quiet. Normally, she is confident, handling heavy equipment and motivating the crew, but this time her face was pale and she repeatedly signaled the crew to stay back. At one point, she even avoided eye contact with the camera, as if she knew that if she spoke, her voice would shake. Fans who watched the episode later said that Monica's expression was probably the first time they had seen it in years. Mike, who was operating the excavator, was clearly shaken. A sudden sinking of the machine is a horrifying experience for an operator, and Mike's trembling hands and stiff shoulders were telling. He once said, "I thought the ground was giving up under me," a line that shook the crew to the core. He sat and stared at the ground for a few minutes, as if asking himself if what had just happened was true. The crew calmed him down, but the shock on his face remained until the end. Now comes the moment that made the entire day emotionally and technically the most tense. Tony Beets' personal field inspection. Normally, Tony provides top-level direction, planning, and monitoring the crew from a safe distance. But that day, he went down to the ground himself, picked up markers, and began checking each spot by hand. The camera captured this moment in slow zoom, and viewers instantly realized that the situation had become much more serious. Tony knelt on the ground, holding the soil in his hand to check its density. He was also breaking the soil and checking its moisture level, a major indicator of underground voids in mining. As he progressed, his face became more tense. The camera crew rarely gets this close, but this time, production intentionally highlighted this inspection so that fans could understand that Tony himself was shaken by the situation. They tested the ground by tapping it with sounding tools like stethoscopes. If there was a hollow area underneath, the tapping would echo differently. When Tony approached the red zone, the tapping sound was completely light and empty. This is the worst signal in mining, because it means the ground has already cracked from within and is just waiting to collapse. Tony closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, as if he knew this was going to change the direction of the discovery season. After the inspection was over, Tony slowly got up and ordered the crew to stay behind. He didn't speak much to anyone, just uttered a short line. "This area isn't safe, not even close." This line was more than a warning to the entire crew. It was an emotional blow that the zone they had been working on for weeks was actually a ticking time bomb. Fans later said that this line from Tony was one of the most chilling moments in Gold Rush. Tony then went to the production team and told them to temporarily stop filming in the area. This in itself was a clear indication that the danger to human life was greater than any footage. It's not hard to imagine how heated the situation would be when Tony himself stopped the camera. The crew members looked at each other. No one was saying anything, but everyone knew that Tony's emergency inspection was the beginning of something big. After the ground scan and Tony's emergency inspection, the biggest fear was the collapsed chamber theory. In the mining world, this is a term that shakes any crew to their core. Experts believe that when GPR consistently detects hollow echoes and a soil tapping test reveals empty sounds, it clearly indicates an old collapsed tunnel or naturally formed sinkhole hidden underground. This is a place where the soil appears solid above, but the entire area below has collapsed. If a chamber collapses 14 feet down, a large portion of the space below it becomes empty. Such a hollow area is like a time bomb. Any heavy machine can suddenly collapse the entire area as soon as it reaches it. Mining experts say that the larger the void pocket, the more dangerous it is, as it can swallow several tons of weight above it in a single second. When Tony's team confirmed the depth reading, the same fear was evident on everyone's faces. They knew the situation was not just risky, but life-threatening. The most dangerous thing about sinkholes is that they don't give any warning. The machine operator thinks the soil is under pressure, but the void beneath suddenly collapses and pulls the machine inside. Excavator, dozer, haul truck, any machine weighing 40,000 to 80,000 lbs reaches this void, making it nearly impossible for it to survive. This is why Tony was constantly checking the entire zone by hand, as he believed the ground's firmness was far below normal consistency. Under mining laws, if there's even a suspicion of a collapsed chamber on a site, half the site must be immediately shut down. Production followed suit, installing warning flags and moving cameras away from that zone. The biggest shock for the crew was that the place they had been digging for weeks was actually hollow inside. This meant that every effort was taking them closer to accidental disaster. This theory became a dark twist for the entire following season. Now let's come to the part that weighed heavily on the entire team, the threat of a multi-million-dollar loss. The cut Tony and crew had been working on for so long was expected to produce $4–6 million worth of gold this season. Ground readings were strong, test pans were positive, and the pay layer looked promising. But as soon as the possibility of a collapsed chamber arose, the entire calculation became uncertain in an instant. In mining, the value of every cut depends on depth, pay streak, and soil density. Tony's team believed the gold concentration would be higher this time than in previous years. But the problem was that due to the sinkhole theory, the entire cut could be declared unstable. If the engineers wrote unsafe in the final report, the entire cut could be permanently closed. This meant a loss of every day, and the entire season's planning could be ruined. Tony and crew knew that it would take at least 2 weeks to relocate the wash plant, trucks, and dozers. And in Alaska Yukon mining, the value of each week isn't measured in thousands of dollars, but in millions. The season is short, the weather is unpredictable, and every day's worth of time is literally worth gold. So when news of the collapsed chamber began to surface, crew members' faces displayed both panic and sadness. It was shocking to fans that the site, which had been expected to yield a multi-million payout, was now becoming the season's biggest setback. Tony himself was taking this very seriously, both financially and emotionally, as his family and crew's entire year's hard work depended on this cut. This uncertainty plunged the dig site into a heavy silence. No machines, no movement, just one question. Will all this gold be lost now? This moment was perhaps the most intense in gold rush history. The risk was high, the gold was high, but the danger below was even higher. And this suspense would change everything in the scenes that followed. After the excavator's sinking and collapsed chamber readings, the atmosphere at the dig site had become so tense that production finally had to take emergency steps. Around 10 a.m., the History Channel production team called the entire crew into a tent. Normally, these meetings are for minor updates, but this time everyone knew the issue was significant. As soon as you entered the tent, you could feel a heavy silence in the air. No one dared to speak up first. The production head first announced that they had reviewed the engineer's preliminary safety report and that digging would have to be temporarily halted. As soon as the crew members heard these words, their eyes widened, because in the world of the gold rush, the word halt is a red flag. Production clearly stated that after so many inconsistent ground readings, it was necessary to stop both filming and digging. This was the first time they stated the reason directly. Safety risk is too high right now. The most striking aspect of this meeting was that the cameras were also turned off. Production stated that they didn't want to take raw footage in such a sensitive situation. Fans were shocked to learn this later, as History Channel typically shoots every detail, big or small, but this time, it wasn't just drama. It truly became a matter of crew safety. Tony and his team sat quietly without argument, knowing that risk was no longer a joke. A crew member casually asked how long the shutdown would last, but production said it wasn't safe to say anything right now. Engineers would have to conduct a full scan, stability check, and obtain approval from the Regional Safety Authority. This meant that digging could be halted not just for a day or two, but possibly for weeks. In mining, such a pause directly means massive financial loss and the disruption of a tightly packed season's entire timetable. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the tent grew heavier. The crew looked at each other, as if someone had replaced hope with uncertainty. Kevin's face fell. Monica was visibly upset, and Mike was still mentally replaying that sinking moment. As production left, they simply said, "No filming until further notice." And those words plunged the dig site into an eerie, haunting silence. Now comes the most emotional and heartbreaking moment. Tony Beets' announcement that shocked millions of viewers. Shortly after the production meeting, Tony stood in front of the camera. Normally, Tony is loud, confident, and a jokester. But this time, as soon as the cameras rolled, he didn't say anything for a while. He just took a deep breath, as if searching for the right words. Then he said softly, "We can't dig anymore. Not like this." His voice was heavy, and the pause was so long that the crew members' hearts raced. Tony explained that the danger of ground readings in a collapsed chamber was so great that further digging posed a significant risk not only to the machines, but also to human life. He said he wasn't the kind of person who would put his crew at risk to extract gold, and that safety always came first. This line was also emotional for the crew, as they knew Tony rarely showed his inner feelings on camera. Tony said something else that shook the entire Gold Rush community. "If we push forward, we might lose more than just gold." This line clearly implied that the situation had reached death-level risk. This wasn't just a mining setback. It was an attempt to avoid a full-scale disaster. Tony's eyes were visibly moist, and there was a slight tremble in his normally powerful voice. Viewers watching the episode wrote, "We've never seen Tony like this before." The camera panned to the crew. Everyone's faces were emotional and frozen. No one had any questions, no complaints. There was just a deep realization that the season's most promising site had now become the most dangerous. And this moment marked the beginning of a tragic update that fans would remember for years. Tony's heartbreaking announcement sent shockwaves not just across the dig site, but across the internet. Fans were shocked, especially since Tony is a name that never seems to be afraid in Gold Rush. Reddit threads flooded overnight, with every post asking one question: what the hell happened? People were writing that this was the first time Tony had looked so low and disturbed. Fans even started long discussions in Facebook groups because the situation seemed different. Theories flooded fan pages so much that moderators had to close comments multiple times. Some said equipment had been damaged, some suspected a major injury, and some even suggested the entire cut might be declared unsafe. No one had concrete information, but the fear in Tony's voice deeply impacted every viewer. It was clear that fans weren't just confused, they were genuinely scared that this season's most promising cut might never reopen. YouTube comments were also in full panic mode. Viewers were writing that they had watched so many seasons of Gold Rush, but had never seen Tony so worried before. One fan wrote, "If Tony says he can't dig, that means something big is coming." Fans began connecting small clues, GPR spikes, machinery halts, inspector's entry, all pointing to a major disaster. This confusion was making fans even more anxious. Now the real suspense begins. Engineers have begun the final scan, and in the next 7 days it will be decided whether the cut will reopen or be permanently closed. This decision will determine not only machine safety, but the direction of the entire season. The team of engineers is scanning the entire area inch by inch with advanced seismic tools and high-frequency GPR readings to determine the size and depth of the void pocket. The biggest fear is that a second anomaly has been found beneath the same spot. It's not as scary as the first, but readings suggest there's likely another hollow structure underneath. If confirmed, it means the ground is completely unstable. This is a twist that could completely change the future of the entire season. Fans are waiting with bated breath for this answer, as one wrong move could lead to the entire site collapsing. These 7 days will be like torture for the crew as well. Machines stand silent, production cameras are off, and everyone's eyes are fixed on the engineer's final report. If the report comes back positive, digging will resume, and hopes of a gold streak will return. But if the report comes back negative, it will become the biggest heartbreaking story of the entire season, and fans will likely discuss it for years. And brother, this is where the strongest CTA for your video is formed. Brother, subscribe. If you miss the next update, the entire story will be lost. Because the update that the engineers are going to give is not just a small twist, but can prove to be the biggest turning point in gold rush history.